So, Metro Boomin and Future have decided to release their long anticipated sequel, We Still Don't Trust You. So, we just received a collaboration record from Metro Boomin and Future, I believe 3 weeks ago, or maybe 4 weeks ago actually, called We Don't Trust You. Obviously, in that album, as I expressed in my review, I said that I really, really liked it. And even from that review, even like ever since reviewing that album, it's just grown on me even more. There's just so many bangers in there. uh, sure, there is some room of improvement as you stated in the video, but I don't know why. But even the songs that I wasn't like super fond of just kind of grew on me even more. But yeah, but that album also stirred up a can of worms. As you know, Kendrick Lamar in the track Like That dissing Drake and J. Cole on the same track. In a like 40-second verse, which caused us just a huge amount of controversy. And obviously, like at the time of recording this video, the whole Cole situation already happened, which Cole apologized for releasing that 7-minute drill diss track that he laid, and he took it off of streaming services, saying he didn't want to partake anymore in any sort of like drama. But Drake said otherwise, and Drake literally called his diss. Hey, Drake literally said, "I'm not gonna follow what Cole said." That shit was whack, which is kind of funny. And he released his monstrous 4-minute diss track yesterday, basically attacking everybody who attacked him in the first album, the second part of, We Still Don't Trust You, which is just kind of insane for me, honestly. But yeah, anyway, this isn't about Drake and his diss tracks and stuff like that. It's just pointing out that it just opened up a can of worms, and now hip hop is eating basically. Everybody's just talking about this beef, and I don't think it's gonna go away. It's really gonna it's gonna stay here for this entire year. But anyway, not to touch more on the stuff that's going on with Kendrick, and the people who diss Drake, obviously. Uh, but yeah, it's just more. I just wanted to point it out because that opened up a can of worms in that album. But anyway, returning to the main topic at hand, We Still Don't Trust You. This again is a sequel to We Don't Trust You. It's released like a short period of time, like 3 or 4 weeks. It seems this is gonna be like the last role that we're gonna have for Metro Boomin for a while. There's obviously a JID collab project that's planned, and I think he has other stuff as well, other collab projects that he's planning on releasing. But it seems that for this year he's just done with. And I don't blame him. This dropping 2 back-to-back projects is insane, especially on this sequel that contains technically 2 discs and is an hour and a half and 25 tracks. So let me break it down. So this review is going to be covering both discs, but obviously the central focus will be more on the first disc, which is the longer disc and is the main, I guess, album and project that Metro wanted to put out. Since the second disc is sort of like labeled as a mixtape, but it's still under the category of We Still Don't Trust You. It's kind of complicated and confusing. But yeah, so the first disc in here basically just, I guess, goes more in this Future Hendrix type of like sound, and I mean it in terms of a self-titled project where it goes more R&B and much more mellow, sort of going a bit more in the melodramatic sense, and again more in that slow trap type of feeling with a lot of reverb in a lot of these tracks. The intro track, the self-titled track, We Still Don't Trust You, which features The Weeknd, and this isn't the first or last time you're gonna hear him on this project. There's like 3 other occasions where The Weeknd is featured, and he really goes off. I kind of wish they stopped using him as a cheat code for a feature, and they just put other people like Don Toliver or some other artist that's I guess suited in that same lane instead of just using for one artist for these features. But I guess we're here. But yeah, the self-titled track was obviously it was sort of leaked, and it was sort of teased by these listening parties and stuff. And just hearing it come into fruition, it's just like a satisfying experience. I will say, lyrically, there really isn't anything going on with this track. It seems that it's much more like Metro, I guess, speaking through this track, with his very nocturnal sort of runaway type beat where you could hear like in a fashion show almost. It's as you can like see models just like running down the aisle, walking down the aisle. I'm sorry, but yeah, it's just a very, I don't know, just kind of like that type of style, which that was pretty cool. I thought that was pretty cool. It has like these like laser perks or effects, just in the background. Sometimes it creeps in. I thought was a very cool utilization of it. But yeah, again, coming back, this record, this first disc is much more R&B focused. There are a couple of tracks in here that I felt was very unnecessary, to be honest. Again, this is like an 18 track album, and I know I talk about length a lot and stress it out in a lot of these reviews, but it is an important factor to this album because there are so many moments in this album that could have been trimmed, but they weren't. I would have taken out tracks like Mile High Memories, Overload, and Gracious, and the reason as to why is because just by seeing the track list, you can just see like how much of a decrease in quality this album could just go to. I mean, especially since you get to the amazing interlude, which I believe is one of the worst songs in this album. It adds nothing of value to the song, to the album, and it is a pointless interlude if I'm being honest. Love Bad Bitches, it's an interesting sort of take, but I don't feel like Future brings in his A game in the song to make it that interesting. Tracks like This Sunday, it was also kind of like just barren and just kind of like dull in its execution. I feel that it could have been replaced or just could have had like a feature again, like Don Tolliver or someone who's more suited in that R&B lane to bring up that track up a notch. But I don't want to just do this review by just bashing that first disc or this album in general. I want to obviously give it its its credit. Again, the self-titled track I feel it was a great starter. Drink and Dance is also pretty. It's a pretty nice continuation. And I believe that Out of My Hands and Jealous are just also just kind of like little bops. I believe that mostly this album, the sound that this album was aiming for, which tracks again like the self-titled one, Drink and Dance, Out of My Hands, songs like that feel this very nocturnal type of vibe. That I believe it's one of those like type of songs that I would listen to if it was like at 12 p.m. or 11 p.m. and I'm like just like sitting there like just listening to music, like those late night type of like work grinds or you just like don't know what to do so listen to music. It's one of those, or even like those late night drives. I don't know why I'm just like I guess aiming towards that, but it just reminds you of like those type of moments that you would have like late at night. I think that album was supposed to like go more in that lane, but again. A lot of this album has some structured issues and flaws, and just like it can be kind of boring at times to just get through. But I guess the highs in this album, if you had to combine them in a playlist, it would have been like a flawless, like late night drive type of playlist. That would have been amazing. I believe it's a track All to Myself or Always Be My Fault where The Weeknd disses Drake. Sort of saying that his shooters are TikTokers. I believe it's a reference that a lot of the OVO members or just, I guess, suited more into TikTok and are just relying on their fame and stardom going through TikTok because he isn't even wrong. OVO doesn't really, like, I guess, care for its artists. That's the same way as they prioritize Drake. I think that Drake should have been doing a better job, especially trying to, coaching his artists like Party Next Door or Smiley or just the other artists that he has signed to OVO, as he always, in the end, has them ghostwriting for him. It's been obviously exposed with the Party Next Door situation years ago. But anyway, it's really interesting because The Weeknd also said that leak, had that one line where he says that their team is like always leaking tracks. And it's funny because the day after this track gets leaked. So I don't know. I think it's a very smart play from The Weeknd. But anyway, again, like just avoiding controversy, which is kind of hard because there is a bunch of like controversy lines and diss lines sneak dissing in this record, especially the final track of this album, Red Leather, which J. Cole is featured in here. I believe they squashed the beef. And I keep it real with you, this song was not that interesting. It really wasn't. For like squashing the beef or whatever, I believe that this song was not like it. Because if I were to squash the beef, like if J. Cole were going to squash the beef with Metro Boomin in the future, I would expect him to like just spit a whole like fire verse. But this verse just was like okay. Like, I don't think this needs to be like a 7-minute track, if anything. I think the guitar loop and drums and stuff are pretty nice. It obviously feels more like a Cole track, if anything. Future kind of did his own little thing, but I don't think it was that impressive. And you could definitely like tell that it's not like under his lane. It's in his lane to rap over beats like this. But again, I think Cole doesn't really do enough on this track to make it, I guess, worthwhile. Unfortunately, which is kind of ironic because if I think like a combination by these three would have been like a legendary status type of thing. I think the track Jealous gives me like this sort of like again Hendrix type of vibe with this trap hard with these hard trap drums and it's like very like again nocturnal sort of like warped sample usage there in the background. And I believe the Future just kind of flows his ass off in here. You can tell that he's more livelier in this track. If the album was much more like Jealous in terms of like having these songs that are kind of like turn up yet slow, sad R&B at the same time, I think that would have been a better outcome. Aside of also just like trimming this album by a couple of tracks. But yeah, anyway, going back to this, I guess the whole picture this album has to offer. It has a lot of things that's coming back and forth. Again, I wish that The Weeknd wasn't like the only feature here. I know I'm seeing like Ty Dolla $ign, and of course J. Cole and Brownstone here listed, but there could have been like much more like other features. And you could tell that he was sort of saving it, or he started like Future and Metro kind of used it up with the first album to bring up the hype a lot. With obviously Kendrick, Rick Ross, Travis Scott, Cardi, a bunch of big names attached to it. But again, with this first disc, I believe that there's just not any like that many memorable or sustainable moments in here. Even after giving it a couple of full listens, this disc hasn't really clicked with me like that much. It has a couple of songs that are worth listening to. Again, I think the songs that are sort of like worth listening to are the self-titled track, Drink and Dance, Out of My Hands, All to Myself, Night Like This, Always Be My Fault, One Big Family, and Jealous. I know it sounds like I'm listening like a couple of tracks there, but in the grander scheme of things, like in a whole album experience, I wouldn't really stick to the entire experience. I would just kind of like skip a lot of these songs, or just like put those songs like in my playlist or something. Just built my little mini album through there. But yeah, again, this first disc isn't really that impressive. It's kind of barren of a lot of substance, and yeah, it's just it really isn't like that worth it. It really is. There's a couple of like nice songs thrown in here in the mix. I think Always Be My Fault is one of the better melodramatic Weeknd features, and I think one of his best features in a while as well. Again, I was kind of like disappointed in the first album where he just kind of like did background vocals only. Well, he could have, just like done a bit more, but whatever. But yeah, again, enough of me yapping for the first disc. I think the first disc is kind of like, it's very meh. And it just could have been something much, it could have been much more in general. So the reason as to why I'm making this review like so like short, I'm just like talking to this album like for a couple of minutes, is because I also want to get to the second disc. So the second disc in here, which doesn't really have a name, just labeled under We Still Don't Trust You, is categorized as a mixtape by Metro Boomin. But again, it's labeled as the second disc in here, so I don't know what's going on. I think the second disc by far was a much more entertaining listen than the first disc. Despite, obviously the first disc having a couple more bangers and stuff, this second disc just gets straight to the point. It's obviously more like an EP, if anything, so it's only like 7 tracks. Technically 6, if you're not counting the 40-second intro. But yeah, there's obviously a couple of surprise features here from Lil Baby and A$AP Rocky. I think there's some ad-libs from like Takeoff or someone from Migos, which is also kind of interesting. Right from the get-go with Nobody Knows My Struggle, we're getting this vintage 2015 DS2 / Monster Future, energy, which I think Southside has also produced that track with Metro Boomin, and it's just awakened a part of me that I just haven't experienced in a while. Like Southside, Metro Boomin, Future, just like an undisputed like 3-headed goat basically. The track All My Life featuring a Lil Baby was also kind of unexpected, but unfortunately the hook in here isn't as interesting for me to really care about the song in general. Lil Baby does a pretty solid performance, and probably the best performance or feature I've heard from him in a minute. But unfortunately, again, Future doesn't really bring his A game on this track, and it just kind of seems a bit filler. I would probably just wish that Future did something more. The beat is okay too for Metro Boomin. I kind of feel the same way with Crossed Out. Again, Crossed Out, we're going with 2-minute runtime. I don't think it offers that much in the record to make it kind of interesting, but I will say that the track with A$AP Rocky, Show of Hands, was pretty cool. It kind of reminded me a bit of that track he did with Metro Boomin and Heroes vs. Villains. I forgot the track, but yeah, it kind of had that same flow. He also calls out Drake on that song, which is kind of interesting. He just sends out a lot of shots. It seems like everybody just hates Drake at this point. Streets Make Me a King, I believe, is a pretty cool outro, but it's not like something out of like the ordinary from Future. It's not like a great song. It's just, to wrap things up. It's just okay, really, in general. Crazy Clientele is pretty interesting. It has a very, very tight chorus from Future, and I believe it's one of the more memorable performances from this second disc. Again, everything in this album kind of seems awkward, and that's why I'm sort of reviewing this record in a very awkward phase or tone or sentiment, because in the end, this record just doesn't have as many exciting moments as we don't trust you had. It just feels more of like, here's 25 songs, you're not gonna hear from us for a while, so just eat it up. Again, I believe that the first disc is pretty boring and slow most of the time. It could have been something more, but I believe that they just didn't edit it properly. There's some songs in here that are worth listening to. As I mentioned, the 6 or 7 songs that are kind of worth listening to. But if you're listening to this album as a whole, it's going to feel very clunky. It's going to feel very boring at times and pointless. Again, even after a couple of listens, there's just some songs in here that I just really don't like. And the second disc, sure, is a bit more exciting, has a couple more bops, but it still isn't like cohesive even as its own project. Overall, I think that We Still Entrust You is kind of disappointing. It really could have been a lot more than what it was, and I feel that we just kind of got leftovers or just like a project that hasn't been fully realized, if anything. And this, in the second disc, I can just say it runs more as an EP, and it should have been like its own, like, I don't know, deluxe edition or something. I don't know why he's categorizing it as a mixtape. I don't know why it's in here, and it's, with bundled up with the first disc. It just feels like a bunch of just bloating happening at the same time. Again, it feels incohesive, and it feels like just way too many things to process at the same time. But yeah, that's kind of how I feel about this record. If you're asking for scores or something, I would probably say the first disc kind of like a 5 or 5.5 out of 10. And the second disc, maybe it's more like a light 6 out of 10. I wasn't like super interested. I wasn't like super, I guess, like captivated by neither of these discs. It just has a couple of cool songs that are in here, like scattered around these 25 songs. But I don't think it's like the most interesting songs that that Metro Boomin nor Future have ever made. I still prefer the first disc by a long shot. That one was much more cohesive, much more consistent, and definitely much more of your time. But yeah, that's how I feel about the record. What do you think of this album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you want to see more reviews, subscribe, turn notification bell on so you miss an upload from me. And yeah, stay safe from anything going up there. And peace out, everybody.